Welcome along to the Gold Coast Speakers podcast, where speakers have conversations so that you can learn more about them, more about their subjects that are passionate to them, and of course, who they are. My name is Michael Croaker. I'll be the host for this particular episode, and I've got the pleasure of speaking with Garie Dooley today. Now, I discovered Garie through the Gold Coast Speakers directory, and after then becoming aware both of his website and the book, Phenomenal Teams, How Leaders Build High-Performance Teams That Last, I knew I had to take the opportunity that I've been given to speak with him. So here we are for the first time. And Garie, thanks for your time. Good to link with you.
Michael, thank you for your time. This is a pleasure indeed.
Yeah, terrific, mate. We might jump straight in. I know time's a little tight. So I'm just curious to go back in time to begin with and understand where that fire got lit inside of you for more now than 2 decades of evolving as an effective leader and mentoring and coaching others for transformation.
Yeah, thank you. It's a really good question. I often sort of reflect on that. When was the moment? And I think one of the challenges I had when I had a corporate career is I always felt like I was putting on a suit and pretending to be whatever I needed to be in that corporate environment. And so there was a real genuine disconnect between what I truly believe in and what I was getting paid to deliver, if that makes sense. And that is not a criticism of the organization I work with. They're all great organizations. But then I took some time to reflect. I thought, what is it I am truly, truly passionate about? And even when I went in my early days and what I studied at uni in terms of behavioral change, in terms of working with behavior problem kids in schools, it's, how do we create an environment where people change for the better? And how do we create an environment that encourages us to be better? And how do we create an environment where performance is behaviorally based? And so that sort of epiphany, I suppose, allowed me to build some models and some frameworks to the point where I got involved with a business in Melbourne called Leading Teams. And I became the CEO of that business. And I worked with the founder, a gentleman called Ray McLean. And we became very well known in the AFL. So we were the guys that created the leadership teams and the feedback and all that sort of thing. So as a consequence of all of that, I then moved on, built some frameworks of my own and realized that the world was changing to the point now where I do work for myself, I do work on my own, but I've built a framework now that I think encompasses some of the great observations I've been privy to with great coaches, great sporting environments, great business environments, great leaders. So a lot of my work now is just simply sharing what I've observed, not my opinion. So,
was mentorship available to you in your formative years? I'm always curious about where really good leaders come from, and often there's a story in there about a mentor or mentors. Did you have exposure to people that lifted that in you?
I think I had one in particular, or two in particular. One that really stands out, a lady called Christine Locker in Adelaide, who was one of the great natural leaders. Like you would follow her, I would follow her anywhere because I trusted her so much, and backed me at times where she didn't necessarily have to. So even when the circumstances gave her the opportunity to step out, she's very much stepped in. And another chap called Brad Shaw, who was very, very clever at the question. He realized very early I wasn't necessarily looking for platitudes, but I was looking for growth. And so he would ask the question that really made me sort of step back a bit and go, oh, gee, there's something in that for me. So I think those two were pivotal. It wasn't structured, I don't think, in a mentoring way. But just my observations of how they got things done, how they created followers was something I still sort of hold to this day.
Yeah, no, that's terrific. I've got some similar experiences that you're talking to there, so I understand. It's wonderful. As you see it, what are the keys to creating a high-performance environment that fosters the creation of building a phenomenal team? Because a lot of it can be about the environment and the tone you set within it, can't it?
Very much so. In fact, you're talking about the leader. I mean, who sets the tone? The leader. Who sets the culture? The leader. But I think, if I was to boil it down to two things, it's the combination or understanding the impact of bringing trust and truth together. Now, that sounds really simple. Bring trust and truth together. However, the amount of work needed for you as a leader to build trust and the amount of work needed to build an environment that encourages the talking of the truth. What is the truth about us right now? What is the truth about this situation right now? Michael, what's the truth about your performance right now? So, creating that environment takes a lot of work. Creating trust takes a lot of work. But I think in essence, it's about bringing those two elements together and understanding they are the drivers. As we all know, Stephen Covey is very, very strong around trust and speed going together. So I think they're the two key elements. Whilst there's a lot of work that rolls up to it, they're the two elements that establish a long-term platform for growth.
Yeah, well said. Would you agree? Trust is often fostered through consistency in your method, isn't it?
Without a doubt. It's consistency of your habits, it's consistency of the standards, consistency of the demonstration of your values. And let's keep in mind, your values are your standards in action. So please don't tell me your values are around integrity and honesty when I watch, you don't really behave in that way. So you're absolutely right. But to your point earlier, Michael, who sets the tone for that leader?
Yeah.
Teams look like their leaders. I've never seen anything that challenges that notion.
Yeah, and I love that line from you just there. Your values are your standards in action. That's really succinct, and it's an absolute truth, isn't it?
I'm sure you come in your, many incarnations of your career, you've come across people that say, I am this, 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 and this, and you watch them behave and go, whoa, well, they're not connected. Don't tell me who you are. I'll watch who you are.
That's great. Yeah, there you are. As teams do become more successful along the journey of unlocking a shared potential, how best do you think leaders should consider how to sustain the consistency and the energy there within that group so it's not fleeting?
Great question. And it's that question that actually separates the great teams from the phenomenal teams. Good teams, without being unkind, there are lots and lots and lots of good teams, who deliver on budget, who deliver on time. But there's a great team, and then there's a phenomenal team. Now, the phenomenal teams are characterized by the depth and width of leadership. So when you do get success, when you have created an environment, your next challenge as a leader is to say, okay, who's next? And so the leader of that great team becomes a bit more obsessed with legacy. Now, if I walk away tomorrow, what sort of shape is this team in, emotionally and technically? And have I created enough leaders behind me for this momentum to continue? Now, how often, and we see in sport a lot, don't we? How often do we see teams have multiple years of success? The coach leaves, the captain leaves, two of your key players leave, and it takes 3 years to rebuild. Phenomenal teams, that transitions are significantly smoother.
Yeah. Again, you've got a very good way of succinctly articulating these sometimes big ideas in a very straight ahead fashion, which I think is terrific. You were talking about sport there and the lessons we can take out of that. What have you noticed along your journey of serial winning head coaches, and what are they doing, the really good ones that you think CEOs could probably look at and think might adopt some of those habits?
Yeah, I think, without being unfair, I've seen it in some CEOs, but the serial winning coaches, they all do it. So the first thing you do is let go of some of the myths around high performance. Now, talent will help, but it's not the key. Resources will help, but it's not the key. Knowing more than anyone else will help, but it won't be the key. Strategy to some degree will help, obviously, but it's not necessarily the key. What is the key is setting a vision for the group, creating belief in that vision, building high levels of trust, building high levels of commitment. Therefore, accountability is just part of the deal, and therefore performance will rise to the surface. So, Paul Roos of the Sydney Swans, for example, that was very much his driver in the early days. Build a vision for this club, build a purpose for this club, and then garner belief around it for the whole club, not just the playing group. And so, no matter who I look at, and I've been fortunate, AFL premierships, Super League premierships, State of Origin winning, gold medal winning teams at the Olympics. I've seen a lot in elite sport. I've seen some really poor performances, but there's that consistent notion of getting the athletes to commit emotionally to why they're there. And, and I've seen it sometimes in corporate, but it's a little harder in corporate, but it's still doable. It's just hard. And then having said that, you look at the Australian swimming team, it'd be very easy for them to drift into, well, the only time we come together as a team is in the opening ceremony, because I'm about, individually winning, but we still manage to harness all of that and form, an emotional connection to what dolphins are about.
Yeah.
So that's what I've noticed. The serial winning coaches are very, very good at. They create that emotional connection to why they're there. marketing rolls into that. The strategy rolls into that. Resources roll into who we recruit rolls into that. What our values look like rolls into that. So no matter what the sport.
No, it's fascinating. With anything, when you put enough years into it, you start to see patterns, don't you? Whether it's human behavior or organizational challenges or internal obstacles. I was just curious, as a bit of an aside, what might be one of the more common roadblocks you see for a team that knows it's perhaps stuck, is needing to transform? And do you sort of see a pattern of things there that kind of pop up at all?
Yeah. I can go straight to the framework. Those teams tend to go flat. And so the flat, if you use that as an acronym, they're either fixed in their thinking. Well, I see that as a bit of a pattern. We'll just turn the sausage machine faster. Because one of the patterns I'm picking up is we are so busy right now. And busy and high performance are not friends. That is not a validation point for a high performing team. Impact, value, transformation, that's the currency for high performance. So they're either fixed. The thing about flat, the L is they're a bit lost. They don't have a vision, or they may have, but don't use it. They have a purpose, don't use it. Have values, don't use it. So, if I'm lost in a forest, any path is the way out. Well, it's not. The A is they're avoiding some stuff. I see that as a bit of a pattern. There's some conversations, some real conversation we're sort of avoiding because we are so busy. And the last one is the T word. And I'm seeing this a bit with AI transformation. We're a bit tentative. And the research is telling us that, anywhere between 80 and 90% of AI initiatives are failing or aren't scaling or aren't delivering. Just a bit tentative around it because we haven't quite connected the cultural shift needed to truly embrace the technology. If you get a bit consumed with the technology, it's almost a race to the bottom.
Yeah.
Unless we're aligning it with the shift in culture that your team needs to make. And as we know, culture is behaviors that you reward and recognize. So unless we're shifting the behaviors that we reward and recognize, the IT initiatives is problematic.
Yeah, wonderful stuff. From your perspective, how should leaders balance growth then with this perceived reality that, as you say, we've just got so much going on right now to deliver and my team are kind of fading? What would you say to that?
As easy as this is to say, take a breath. Take a breath. I think take an audit, an emotional audit of where your team's at. And in a simple sense, just check. Have we got clarity of our vision? Have we got clarity of our purpose? Have we got clarity about how we go about our work around here, aka your values? And what sort of shape are we all in emotionally here right now? So it's almost, let's take a breath, take an audit, because we're always in a disruptive environment to some degree. I think what's happened recently, the speed of that disruption is quite alarming. But I think the great leaders are taking a breath, stopping and checking on their teams, and they're making sure that their team is provided with the emotional tools, the safety, the trust around the shifts needed in their own behavior. So it's just that take a breath. It's literally sometimes take half a day, get your team in a room and let's go through where we're at.
Yeah, that's very good.
Shift what we value. Let's shift a little bit what we value. Do we value output, which is get more done, or do we value outcome? Let's do amazing things. They're very, very different.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good distinction. I was 30 years of age and was entertainment manager at a park called Wonderland at Sydney that's no longer there. And we were cash flow negative at the time. And I remember our CEO, we're in crisis mode. Then he would use that language because, we were in this whirlpool. And he called he named crisis meetings once fortnightly. And they were called the crisis meetings, which of course set off a big stress through the team, the language. And no one would tell the emperor he had no clothes on. It was all sort of hallway chats. But once you got into the boardroom, it was all slightly different. I remember I sat in there, young, and he asked who would like to kick off this week's crisis meeting, and I put my hand up and said, could I move that we have a crisis meeting today on how to avoid crisis meetings? And there was a little bit of laughter, and he looked at me, and I said, no, I say it with respect, because we're going to sit here for 2 or 3 hours and talk about how to shrink, how to conserve, how to freeze wages and recruitment and reduce capital, which we can all do, but we'll never talk about product or people. I really believe if we focused on, like you were saying before, what is the outcome? If we could talk about what the product is and how the people matter to it and connect to it, I would argue revenue will follow. But if it's chopping and cutting at the cost of the product and the people, because we're in crisis, and it's like you said, had we just made more time to sort of, let's take a breath. We know the house is burning, but it doesn't mean we have to lose it.
Exactly. I love that. I love that notion, Michael. Well done. It's amazing how much room is left in the room when the elephant's like, hang on. Wow, we've got all this space now because we've addressed the fact that we're not talking about, the product. We're not talking about our people. We all know it. And I keep, come right back to your earlier question. That's the power of the truth. That's the power of having high levels of trust where it's safe to talk about the truth. That's the power of it. What was slowing you down why did you have to have a crisis meeting every week? Because we're going slower. Okay, why is that? Because we're not talking about the people who we are expecting to deliver an amazing product. Great story.
No, I appreciate it. I did get asked to stay behind, and when he emptied the boardroom, he looked at me and said, I thought he might want to have an honest chat. And he said, don't ever hijack one of my meetings again. And that was the line I got. And I was still a long way from learning the boardroom dynamics and the unspoken etiquette.
They're a crazy place, aren't they? They are a crazy place.
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
So I started my working life working with behaviour problem adolescents. And there are some times I walk into boardrooms, I think about a flashback. I think I am Back to the Future or something. Because I see the same behaviours sometimes. Oh, there's the bully, there's the victim, there's the enabler, there's the...
There you go. It's fascinating. There's a lot going on across many industries simultaneously. What do you see as the major challenge for leaders in the times in which we find ourselves right now, do you think?
Yeah, good. If I boil it down, it's probably two. What sort of shape are you in as a leader, truly? Because unfortunately, it's very hard to lead others if you're not great at leading yourself. That'd be the first challenge. Really, if you haven't got a coach, get one. Get a good one that's going to hold you accountable. So what sort of shape are you in as a leader is your first challenge. Teams will look like their leaders. I can see it all the time. If the leader is a bit frazzled and frayed and uncertain and unclear, guess what? The team will be. So that's the first challenge. The second challenge is then how do I step in? Now, in fact, step in, not lean in, step in, like really get into it. Step into my leadership brand in a way that enables the team to become more cohesive, more collaborative, more focused, have more belief, be more optimistic. So I think they're absolutely connected. The first step is what sort of shape are you in? And therefore, what impact can you have on your team? As I said earlier, Michael, if it's just about getting AI projects or whatever it is, it's a race to the bottom. This isn't a management era. This is a leadership era that we're entering. And the winners will be the one, I believe, from what I've seen, the winners will be the one that embrace the leadership notion rather than the management notion. The management notion is very much about what do we have to do? The leadership moment is around who do we have to be? Well, I think it's that last one that will be the winner.
That last 1 minute, 30 seconds is a masterclass, a micro masterclass, because I've seen it a lot over the years too, where leaders struggle with the distinction between management and leadership, and it's kind of bundled into this mess.
Yes, and you're absolutely right. And unfortunately, it's more comfortable to defer to management. It's more comfortable to defer to systems, processes, the way we've all short-term wins versus becoming a better version of yourself, helping others become better versions of themselves. Like you look at the two, you go, well, that's hard. That's not so hard. The management's not easy, but it's not quite as hard as this. So it's a little more comfortable to be management focused, which unfortunately, as we know, comfort and growth aren't friends.
Rich conversation in the short amount of time that we've had so far, mate. So I thank you for that.
Well, thank you.
I can clearly see how passionate you are, and this whole way of being is just in your DNA. What brings you the joy in the work after all these years? What gives you the kick and the enthusiasm that you clearly still have?
In fact, I had this conversation today with a client. I just get so excited when I see the shift. And yes, because they're so excited, Michael. Sometimes you have to remind them where they've been and where they are now and how far they've come. Because it's not like excitement because, my stuff works. It's like they get so excited about future and the possibilities. But as someone gave me some feedback today, so you might need to put out up front that your work is only for the brave. And it's like, oh yeah, it's good feedback. No, I think you should say it. Like when you start, say it. Because, transformation and growth are for the brave. But I think I get the biggest kick when someone is brave enough to say, you know what, I'm up for this. I'm up for change. I'm up for transformation. I'm up to caring about my people. And then seeing the shift there isn't a better reason to get up and go to work.
Yeah, it's beautifully put. I've really enjoyed this little bit of time that we've been given to speak, Garie, and look forward to maybe doing it again in the near future, even less formally. But it's wonderful to get you here on the podcast. So a big thank you for joining us here. If you're listening and you would like to have Garie at your next event right here on the Gold Coast, I, of course, can personally recommend him as a speaker that's going to deliver to your audience. And you can simply head over to Gold Coast Speakers directory at goldcoastspeakers.com.au. You'll find all the links and contact details for Garie Dooley there and a whole range of other speakers that you can also take a look across. Well, Garie, thanks again for your time, mate. This has been a terrific episode. New for me. I didn't know what to expect, but I've loved doing this with you. And again, a little micro masterclass in so many themes there. So time well spent for our listeners. Look forward to catching up in the future, mate.
Yeah. Thank you again, Michael.